All right, folks, I'm back. I had some Zoom issues and my camera's still not working, which maybe is a good thing. But I wanted to follow up a little bit here in the second video with floats. And I just want to show you that in the example that I have here, I have some example divs that you can borrow from if you just want to try this, right? And I just want to show you how easy it is to borrow it. And of course, I'm in instructor mode here, so my bright space is behaving that way. So I'm going to switch to learner mode and get myself to unit 8. And I just want to show you, like, if you wanted to do a basic 2-column layout and they have a little snippet of code here, you can borrow these divs down here. And for example, put those somewhere on your page. Okay, and then you can also borrow from, and I'm going to just put here the clear class to get rid of any floats that might happen, just in case. And then I'm also going to borrow the CSS that they provided. And I'm hoping none of it should interfere with what I have here. So I'm going to add that to my style sheet. I'm just going to throw that at the bottom. And I'm going to put in a little comment here, sample code from unit 8. And in true geeky fashion, I'm also going to put end sample code. So I know where it ends. Right, so I'm containerizing it basically. I'm going to save my CSS. I am going to save my code file, and then I'm going to go back to the live server page here. And I want you, this is what I added up here, right? It's just a very simple sidebar and main content, not too dissimilar from what we had going on, if you remember, on W3 schools. Like if you wanted to just get 2 columns on your page all the way down, well, there you go. It's really that quite that simple. Just to kind of review what we're doing there, we just have a container. It's got a sidebar div and a content div. Those could be regular HTML tags, so you could use like aside and article, for example, if you wished. The CSS basically set the one to 25% and the other one to 75%. Gave it some other basic styling. Both are floating left, filling up the space. And then we do a clear fix after. So basically, after this stuff is all done, we're getting rid of the float, right? I also put a clear float on the container below. And that wasn't really necessary, frankly, but I just did it anyhow. Yeah, okay. So that's just an example. I just wanted to show you that, like, if you are looking for a certain look, chances are you can probably Google it and say like 2-column float layout or 3-column float layout or something like that, and you can find some code. W3 does have some good examples. It just depends on the look you're going for. Ultimately, that's really kind of what drives all this stuff. All right, let's now work on doing some flex stuff. And what I'm going to do here to just kind of maybe, let's say, speed up the process just a little bit is I'm going to take my code test page and I am going to make a copy of it and then paste it back into the folder here. And then I'm going to rename this code test 2, right? And I just want a fresh page to work on, basically. I'm going to go ahead and remove all the content in the main section so that basically we're just starting with a blank page. I have my header and my footer, right? The other thing that I should probably do is if I have a code test 1, right? If I have code test and then I'm going to add a code test 2, is I should probably add a menu item to it. So this is -2. And then that should be added to all the pages. So let's put it on about. Let's put it on code test 2 already has it. Code test will need it also. Contact will need it. Index will need it. And the media page will also need it. All right. And then I'm going to just come up here and do a save all. Love that trick, right? So I just saved all the pages at once. And let's just go back to the browser view here. I'm going to go full screen momentarily and just to see here. Home, contact, about, code 1. I should probably change the text here to say code 2, I think. So that would be the only tweak I would make. So I'm going to just do that really quickly on all the pages. I know it's kind of silly, but I think it helps. And I think that was just about all of them. Excuse me. All right, let's do a save all one more time. All right, let's go back to the browser really quick and take a look. All right, so there's code 2, there's code 1. All right, so now we're going to do our Flexbox stuff here on code 2. And once again, if you see a functional reason to add this to one of your other pages right away, I mean, go for it, right? It's not a big deal. You can always undo it. I'm just doing a like practice on a code page to try the technique, see how it fits on my site. And then if I really dig it, I can apply it to whatever page I think is appropriate. So I'm going to leave it here on code 2. All right, let's do the split screen thing again. Let me do my Windows key, right arrow. Let's put BSC over on the left here. I will do a little bit of adjusting, but I think that'll be good right there. Okay. Let's look at code test 2 as our page. So all the content that we're going to create is going to go here. Now we've had some examples of this already. And let me see if I can get my Brightspace window back here. And I'm still in learner view. You know, this is kind of an odd view to look at it in, but hey, it is what it is. All right, so we were looking at some of the basic Flexbox principles, but I do want to kind of point out, and I'm not intending here to go super granular on this because real frankly, some of it will be driven by your need. I did provide a video here, and I'm going to show you where that is really quick. These two videos here, I think, do a really, really nice job of showing CSS floats. This one is maybe 15 minutes long, something like that. And this one's maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes long. I might have it open over here still. 8 minutes on this one. And it covers most of the major features in that 8 minutes. So I highly, highly recommend it. And the person doing it is way more of an expert and more comfortable with it than I am, real frankly. But let's just look at some of the basic properties here as we work with Flex. So from a conceptual standpoint, right, any container that is a block level element in HTML, we can apply the display flex property to it. And then that creates a container that can resize itself dynamically depending on how it's appearing on your screen, right? Whether it's full screen, whether it's narrowed up, whether it's on a mobile device, or the phone is flipped sideways, or your tablet's flipped sideways, it will adjust to it automatically. And you can just apply that to a container and walk away from it, and it will automatically respond. It is important to note, though, that most basic HTML elements do that anyhow, right? So like, for example, if I was looking at my homepage here, I never put flex on this top bar, right? But notice how that is automatically adjusting in size. Right. The container that I have here, that I think I called this the wrapper, That one has a setting, I forget what the width is set to. I think it's like 80% or 70%, something like that. That will always maintain that 70% size. But it also, if you monitor it, it does flex automatically. So basic HTML elements do automatically resize themselves. It's when I start to put stuff in that has a specific size, and watch, like here, like the CSS float thing will only allow me to go so small. But as I play with some of these other things and I make them smaller, they do start to break and move around. And I can sometimes hit limitations as to how big or small they can be. This isn't really a super good demo, but I think last time I did do an example of, like, I had an object that was way bigger than the narrowness I made the screen, and it was going out of the container and off to the side, if you remember that. So that's what can happen when you like give something a specific size with pixels, right? And generally, a lot of modern designers don't like to put specific pixel sizes on things they want to adjust. They prefer percentages because those are dynamic, or they prefer to go flex to also make it, once again, dynamic and automatically adjusting. So the overall setting, then, the point is that all it takes to make something flex is to apply that display property to it. All right, so kind of walking through some of the basic properties in CSS. So the one thing is that we have display flex. So that needs to be listed as a property. You can place that on the parent container often, and then the stuff inside will automatically adjust as well. Now, flex direction defines basically which direction that we work in. And just to kind of like break this down, the flex direction is basically referring to the fact that most things will flex across a horizontal plane by default. So I don't normally declare flex direction unless I'm trying to change which way it's going. If I don't want the flex to happen across the page horizontally, then I usually flip it to what we call column approach, and then it flexes the other direction, right? And I would say that's more unusual, but that's the thing that you can do. Justify is a thing that we use pretty often. That in one of the more common settings is just the center stuff. So if I put, like, let's say 3 little boxes on the screen, well, I don't want them all off to one side. I kind of want them in the middle, right? And there's a couple of other little tweaks you can do where you can space them evenly, and I really like that technique. We can also do alignment of items. And this one's kind of harder to explain, and I really suggest you watch that video I have linked up to see how that one works, because he does a really nice demo on that. We also can look at wrapping things. So if I have, let's say, 5 little boxes going across the screen, and I make the screen narrow, the wrap allows the boxes that would normally be cut off to move down below, right? So that's pretty helpful too. And then aligning content, where this is a really common command to have space around them so that they're not necessarily touching each other, right? So some really common settings you see here: display flex. The flex direction is a row. That, by the way, this is the default, so you don't normally declare that, right? So the direction is either row or column. Row is horizontal. If that's not present, that's just happening, right? So that's important to know. Normally, if you're adding direction, it's going to say column. Justify content, space between, is a very useful one too. That's the one I like to use most often. So if I have multiple little boxes, they're not touching. And then aligning items to the center is a really useful one too. Let me see if I can kind of demonstrate a little bit of that, because these are some of the more basic commands here inside of Flex. So let me come over to the coding window here, and let's just build a couple of different things, and then we'll borrow some of this code, and then you'll see how it behaves. So I think that what makes a lot of sense here to me is to have a div with an ID, and they're using a class. So let's do that. Let's follow what they're doing. They're calling a class container, right? Different than the ID container, so I'll have to refer to it differently. I'll make a little space here, and then I'm gonna borrow from my other code page. Oh, what did I do? Item 1, item 2, item 3, something like that. Why don't I just borrow this and drop it over here? I don't really feel like typing it all. Right. It's basically my brain or mindset right now. So I have item 11, and you'll see my madness here, or my logicness, if you will. And just so they don't get confused with the things on the other pages, I'm doing 11, 22, and 33. Right. These are all set to be IDs right now. I guess that's fine. But I did a container class for the parent element. And let's work with that. So I have my styles, or like my structure, kind of declared here. Let's jump over to the style sheet way at the bottom. I'll do a dot container for the class container that I just created. And for that, let's just put in display flex for right now. I will play with some of the other styles as we kind of move forward, but for right now, that's enough on the outer container. Then on the inner container, let's just see if we can borrow some of this stuff here. And you'll see the method to my madness, hopefully. So I'll call this one 11, and then we'll borrow. And I am going to remove the floats. I just want to let you know that. So maybe I should have removed them first, but so we'll do item 22 and item 33. Let's get rid of the floats and the margins. So we won't need those anymore, because we're going to be using Flex. And for right now, let's just go ahead and take a look at these and see how they're looking on the page. All right, let's save the style sheet. Let's go back to the live server here, and I want to go to my code 2 page. And so here I have that. Now, okay, so this is a little problematic because all the boxes are the same size and they're the same color, and they're right next to each other in the flow, and they're all touching, and I can't tell where one starts and the other ends. So either I should change their colors. So maybe I'll do that a little bit. It probably makes sense to be able to tell them apart. All right, let's save that. Okay, so now we can see them, right? And if you wanted, the other approach would be you could put a border on them. So you could say maybe something like 2 pixels, solid, and black. And then I'll put that on all of them. Once again, saving, and now I can see them. But you notice they're inside the container, and they are all touching, right? So one thing I could do in the container is I could use this technique here, where align items in the center. Let's try that first. Let's have the live view up. I'm going to save. Oops, sorry. I'm going to save here, not in the browser. And it did nothing, right? It didn't change a darn thing on them, did it? Yeah, it did. Okay, so let's add this command too, and let's see if this one needs to be there as well in order for that to work. So saving once again, back to the live view, and there's your space between. Okay. Now that's kind of okay, right? And at least they're kind of evenly spaced. And right away my brain goes, oh yeah, I think I could use that. In fact, I could make these, let's say 200 pixels wide each, right? And if your brain's thinking like mine, and you're getting like layout ideas just from doing that, okay, well, that was maybe a little too wide. But if I widen it out, notice that the space is maintained, right? So I think this is kind of a useful technique for working with um, that piece of it. Now I'm kind of looking at an example I have on my other screen here, um, and I'm and I'm just trying to read this code, and I apologize. I'm having like a myriad of like tech issues all here at the same time. Okay, another thing I'd like to point out, right, and I guess we did talk about the flex direction thing, and I kind of feel compelled to just demonstrate it because normally we do row, right? And when I do row, it's just going to stay the way it is. But if I switch it to column, watch what happens. Interesting, right? So now it's flipping it the other direction, and all it takes is that one command, right? So like you can imagine if you were writing, um, for example, a media query to adjust to a mobile screen size, you could take your stuff instead of being next to each other and then stack them like that. So that's a possibility. I think that the the neat aspect of this, real frankly, is when you do get rid of that command, right, and it goes back to the default of being row, that you can get some of those layouts that you might be thinking about, or you see on a lot of websites, right? A lot of websites do use this approach. All right. Let's try to do another kind of thing here. Space between is kind of a good command, but there's also this other one called space evenly. And I want you to notice what that did. Did you notice how that pushed it away from the margins a little bit? And and um and maybe I should revert here. Let me go back. Let me just control Z that. So here's space between. And then here's space evenly. Okay. And I could see uses for both. I think those are both pretty neat. We can also do a bunch of different things, kind of like with controlling typography inside there. Um, and I do want to go back to this align thing, because there's a couple of different commands that we can throw in. For example, start is one of them. Here's a save on that. And boy, it is just not doing what I want it to do here. Oh, and I'm using the wrong syntax as well. It should be flex start, and it's still not changing it the way I want it to change. All right, so this is kind of embarrassing because it's just, when stuff doesn't work the way you want it to. But it seems like this align command is just not working for me for whatever reason. And let me just save and see. Yeah, it's just not really kind of doing anything. The other thing that we could do that I think is kind of interesting is, what if in my code file, and I'm going to readjust this, I took some of these containers and added some more of them. Okay, just to kind of confuse things. I'm going to save this, and I want you to notice what happens. Right. Now, if I, in my style sheet, say flex dash wrap, like so, and I save it, notice what happens to the layout then. And not only does it adjust and fit, but it also, kind of moves with your page. And I think this effect is a little weird here, right? It looked better when they all were lining up beautifully. But the point is that if I have a bunch of containers like that, I can get them to wrap inside the page. Right. So that I think is pretty helpful. There are some additional commands that we can throw in, and I'm trying to figure out one that would make sense here. I'm going to go back and kind of remove some of these extra containers right now because those are a little superfluous. But I could, for example, with one of these, and I should save my work. Okay, we're going back to 3 boxes. I could take, let's say, this first item here, and I could add another flex command right inside of it. And I can use this command here, which I think is a pretty interesting one. So, and I'm giving it a value, and the value is kind of relative, by the way. So let me do the save on this so you can kind of see what effect it has. Um, this command basically allows this to increase in size to fill the remainder of the container as much as it can. So in other words, this one and this one have a fixed width on them. And, and actually technically this one does too, however, this width is now irrelevant, right? So just to kind of prove that, I can put my comments around it like so. So when I save it, and then when I adjust the window, and maybe I should break out of this mode here. This is probably better. I just want you to notice how that one will keep growing. Right, that's pretty cool. There is also a flex shrink command that does the converse, right? So you could play with that one if you want. Another thing that a lot of designers do is they will play with settings like this, and I'm going to kind of I'm going to try to find a way to make this as copacetic here as possible. I'm going to remove the widths from all of these on purpose. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to put in just a basic flex command and use a number. And this is an approach that basically gives us relative sizing values. And then I'll use 2 on the other 2. And then you'll see the effect of this once I save it. So saving. And basically this is kind of like, saying whatever the size of this is, in the space that we have available, this will occupy, well, we have 5 total units declared here. 1 plus 2 plus 2 is 5, right? So this one will occupy 1, the first one. The second one will occupy 2, and the third one will occupy 2. If I wanted, I could also, let's say, maybe change this to a 1 and maybe change that to like maybe a larger number, like 4. And then I can get a layout that kind of looks like this. Right. And I think that's kind of a neat effect. It is kind of ignoring the space between thing. But if you're trying to build like columns, but notice it completely adjusts all the way through without having to mess with sizes or widths or anything like that. So I think this is a particularly useful approach as well. Now, I don't want to spend too much more time on doing this stuff because we are running out of time really fast and I want to get on to a different topic. But I would strongly suggest you watch that video that I just recommended because the guy does a great job of showing you how all this stuff works. You can also change the order of how the flex items appear, which isn't always a great idea because it breaks the flow of the page also. They have some examples here of building like a basic layout. Once again, a 2-column layout using flex commands instead of floats. And if you were asking me like which approach would I use today if I was building a page from scratch, I would totally go with flex over float. I've always struggled with float, even when I kind of was doing it a lot, because there's always things you forget, and then you move it to a different screen and it breaks, and then you're fixing it and writing media queries and all that stuff. What I do want to talk about next is this last concept, which I think is pretty important to talk about. Web hosting, domain names, and maybe if we have time, project approaches. So right now, as we're building web pages, we go through the process of, for example, I give you an assignment, you code your pages, you upload it to Prometheus, you're using FTP, and that's a pretty powerful tool. So like the ability to take files from your local machine and then over the internet, push them onto a server that people can access publicly, and you can publish your web pages, is a pretty powerful thing. And I don't know if you guys are feeling that, right? Like, wow, it's like I'm in school and I'm putting my web pages out there. And if you give that URL, the same URL you give to me, you can give it to somebody else and they can see your work. There's nothing blocking it. And yes, eventually Google will find it and index it also, by the way, right? Um, whether you like it or not, sometimes. However, when you build a real website, and I want you to think about this, you go to somebody's web page, and how do you get to a web page? Well, most of the times we just Google search something, a link comes up, or somebody gives you a link, or you see a link on a website and you click on it and the page comes up. But most of the time, if we're going to a website, we are typing in a URL. And oh, isn't that interesting? I can't load that page. Okay. Is that because it's an HTTP? No, it's HTTPS. I probably have, you know what, if I put this in a incognito window, it'll probably load up just fine. Okay, maybe not. Batting 1,000 here, folks. I assume you guys are not having that problem. I think that's a pretty good indicator. But anyhow, the whole point here is that when you go to a web page, we have an address that we type into the address bar to get there. Now, very commonly, when we go out to a web page, the domain name that we're visiting, like for example, we have the Prometheus server, but the Prometheus part of it is actually what we call a subdomain, right? The real domain for gateway is gtc.edu. And if I go to, for example, if I go to gtc.edu, it brings up Gateway's website. Notice it adds www in front of it, but that's not really even necessary. So a domain name is really the plain English words that we use to access any website on the internet. In reality, whenever we go to a website and we type in a web name to go, let's say we go to, I don't know, Microsoft.com or something like that. What happens in the background is you type in that web address and it goes to a thing that we call a domain name server. And what a domain name server does is it takes the words that you type, it looks it up in a database. So it'll look up, for example, like google.com, and I'll go, oh, google.com is at this numeric IP address. And I would bet this kind of shows how that works. But like if you put in like a web address, the machine doesn't actually have that address. It has a numeric address on the internet, and the domain name process looks it up literally in a database and goes, okay, where is google.com located? And then it gets the address, and then the traffic can go there. I want you to think about how quick that happens when you type it in, right? You type google.com and it's like, boom, it's there. So in that time, it looked it up in a database, found the number, and then directed the traffic and got you there. And it might be on the other side of the planet. And it's like blink of an eye, quick. Now, we need those domain names. Why? Because none of us could ever remember the numbers for the servers that we're going to. Just not going to happen, right? Think about trying to memorize everybody's phone numbers. It was hard enough when it was only 7 digits, and they threw in those area codes, and oh my god, right? And it was really kind of a thing. Also, think about it like this: like, how many of you even bothered to memorize your phone numbers? You just have contacts in your phone, and then if you don't have your phone and your contact list, you don't know how to call anybody, right? Because you don't know their numbers, right? In reality, I know that's kind of a scary thought. But the domain name system is a thing that exists. It is run by an organization called ICANN, right? Which is the standards issuing body for domain names on the planet. The original database originated in North Carolina, here in the United States, at the University of North Carolina. And the host parent server still resides there at that campus, right? There are a minimum of, I think, 13 or 14 other primary nodes. And then there's a lot of secondary ones. And then there's private DNS servers. And we just had an internet outage just like a day or two ago where AWS went down. And the part of it that went down was the domain name services that failed. So when you would like try to go to Snapchat, it didn't know how to go there, right? You can see why that's a problem. So we rely on this a lot. You can go out to the internet and look at domain names, right? And I'm going to actually do this a little bit different way here. I do want to go to Wikipedia. Domain names fit into certain categories. So we have .coms, for example, .orgs, .net, .int, .edu, .gov, .mil, right? And we have some other weird ones like this that nobody knows about or uses. And then in the early 2000s, or maybe it was the late 2000s, they came out with country top-level domains, where every country on the planet was assigned a 2-letter extension. So, for example, for the US, it's US. For England, it's UK. And you can go through this list. Every country on the planet has a 2-letter top-level domain name extension. Canada is .ca. Here's one you would never guess. .cn is the People's Republic of China, right? And you do see these once in a while, right? People have these 2-letter domains. You can also create custom top-level domain. I'm not sure which one of these articles will get me there, and I'm probably not looking at the right one. But they do have like these ones that are reserved, but somewhere they've come up with this whole, and I'm not finding it really easy right now, and I apologize, but I don't know exactly when it happened, right around 2010 or so. They basically allowed you to come up with whatever, like, it's like if you couldn't find a .com for your business, you could either buy a custom one or you can buy a custom one that somebody else has created. So for example, we once did a restaurant site for somebody and it was called On the Way Cafe, and they wanted onthewaycafe.com, but it was already taken, right? But then I'm like, they do have a .cafe. So you could get on the way .cafe, right? That kind of thing. So that's out there. Domain names are something you can purchase. The biggest one in the game is with GoDaddy. They sell more domain names than anybody. And if you're interested in like, I don't know, like come up with a business name, right? And I'll just use that one as an example, right? Oh, look, it's available, right? But back when she was looking for it, they couldn't find it. And notice, oh my God, it's not cheap, right? So somebody, when you see a price like this means somebody already owns it and they're trying to make some money off of it. But normally a domain name, and check it out, like they don't really cost that much. $20 to $30 is about the norm for a .com, and that's a recurring annual fee. One thing I tell my web students is if you're serious about doing this and you got this like or a business idea or whatever and you want to buy a website name, there's no time like the present to go out and buy it. And there's a lot of different services you can buy it from, and you should totally shop around because the prices are different. And a lot of them do like what we call loss leader pricing, like this, for example, where they give it to you super cheap, but this is the real price every year. The other thing that happens is after you buy a domain name, you need a place to put your website on the internet. And then what happens is you'll end up at a place for example, like GoDaddy or 1&1 or Bluehost or HostGator or one of these commercial companies where you can buy web hosting for a monthly fee. What we do here at Gateway is we just give you server space and an account and you FTP your files. These are full-blown hosting platforms where you can run web applications or static websites if you wish. You can attach email accounts to them, run e-commerce, all sorts of stuff. And I just want you guys to be aware of this stuff, not like you have to rush out and buy anything like this. But when you get serious about doing web work and you start building websites for your clients, whether it's professionally or privately, these are steps you will have to take along the way to launch a website. Because where's your client going to put their website? It's not like they're going to buy a server, connect it to the internet, and run it on their own. So what happens is people buy these services from big companies like GoDaddy. They buy the domain name and the hosting, and then they're either paying annually or monthly for the services. And there is a cost involved, but you also get a lot of features for the money. And this is just an example, right? And once again, there's literally hundreds or thousands of companies that sell these services. And when you really want to launch a website for real, this is kind of what you have to do. All right, folks, we are out of time.